Any concerns, discussion needed about the minutes?
No.
All good, motion to approve?
Yeah.
All in favor, great. Okay, so let's, as I mentioned, Joe's here till 3. I'd like to cover at least the next 2 items after the water level report. So, why don't you take us into it, Greg?
Water report? I forgot to put my hearing aids in this morning. So,
I'll speak. I don't have my mask on right at the moment.
I think just very quickly, we've had some extraordinary rainfall in the last month and a half. Actually, last month, I suppose. And through December 31, in the month of, really in the month of December, we Ken reported 6.31 inches of rain. And I think that we've had about the same in early January, right?
Yes. So, exact 6.4, I believe we're at right now.
Which was like a record for the 5 years or so that you were tracking.
It's one of the highest.
Yeah, for January, yeah. I think it is the highest, and it's not the end of the month.
So, the conclusion, I think, would be is that we're above the median now. There's no reason, we can go to that normal status, which tells homeowners, don't waste water, but,
Normally cautious.
whatever, that we're in pretty good shape.
Especially.
I don't know, Ken, you got anything you want to add on?
Not really. It's just been an incredible month, and it's not over. We had some more rain, supposedly, another couple of days
Yeah.
before the end of the month. So between those two things, I'll report on that, and it'll be, again, probably one of our better Januaries that we've had in a long time. Like last year, I know we ended up at about 41.64 for the year, which I said was average. Average is a variable number depending upon what document you're looking at. Suffolk County likes about 45 inches, and so my average is a little less than that over the years. But it's been a great start, let's say that.
And the one thing that, I have started, and I didn't send this in because it's too early to go through in detail, but we've had this extraordinary level of rain over really the past 30 days. And I'm looking at using the data logger information to see the reaction of rainfall on Aquifer Heights, on Goat Hill, Manwaring, and Brander.
I think it's something we really ought to be including.
Yeah.
We should be getting familiar with how quickly the aquifer responds to events.
Yeah, the one thing that I've noted at this point anyway is that with all that rain, Manwaring went up about a foot, Goat Hill went up about 1.2, and Brander went up about 1.37. So we had almost 12 inches of rain, and that figured out to about a foot ultimately.
Wow.
Amazingly,
Well-
on these wells anyway. However, there seems to be a difference in when they start to react to the rainfall, and that's why I haven't worked that out in this sheet yet. So,
But with different heights, you would expect there would be a difference.
yeah.
But it is,
So-
and we are in a period of time with the least evapotranspiration, and so therefore you would expect.
So we'll have some information, I'll have more information, when I can really absorb it.
Yeah, for the minutes, I guess you could say it's 6.41 inches that we've had so far through January the 20th. Last year, in January, we had 6.2 inches. So January, last couple of years has been a fine month.
Yeah, I just had a very quick question, Greg. The well heights, are they all the same depth? The wells, the test wells?
No.
Okay, so that would be a variable.
That's exactly correct. That's why Brander seemed to
Soil
react.
porosity and everything, right?
Brander, the one thing that I see here right now is that Brander reacts to the rainfall, goes up, but then drops back down again right away, because I think the influence of the tide just mellows it back out again.
It can only handle so much. Basically, it
Right.
could rain 40 days and 40 nights.
Yeah.
And the water level only will go so far, and it just runs out into the
Well,
bay.
yeah, we know from our all previous work that 95% of the rain that gets absorbed can't be handled and flows out through the saltwater interface. So right? Which is the reason why, in general, but not in specific areas, the saltwater boundary doesn't migrate inward. If you've been reading the Leggett-Frisch's study.
Well, I would imagine.
However,
They probably, the saltwater interface probably has pushed out a little bit after this. It does, it breathes, as they say.
If I'll just follow up on that, where can I find where the well depths are,
Oh, I have them.
just where, in the share file?
Well, they're in actually the top of the file for each of the wells, if you want to get into the USGS system that has them all enumerated. I'll send it to you.
Yeah, would you send it? That'd be great.
Yeah.
So I,
yeah, you should be able to click into each of the wells and see all the.
It'd be nice across the top of that chart if you had room for another row.
okay.
Yep, which is really great. I mean, it's nice to have that all.
Yeah.
Okay, so well, I mean, do we need to do anything to move ourselves to normal officially in any way, or?
Pardon me?
The normal level, we're at the normal level already?
I don't think that it's been changed yet, right? We're still, I did not look at the,
Normal is always started.
Right.
So,
We're there. You're saying we don't have to do anything
Yeah.
specific. Okay.
but in the long run, though, we may want to kind of modify that language a little bit, but
yeah.
we haven't yet.
Okay. All right, well, put it on the agenda when we're ready to have that conversation. Okay, so I'd like to move, assuming everybody's okay with that stuff, I'd like to move on to, thinking about the center triangle data and analysis of the center triangle data. Greg, again, thank you. You seem to lead our way in terms of graphical analysis of the
very good.
data. It's very, very helpful.
Great.
I thought that was really great work. I'll be critical of it, but only in a constructive sense.
I'm a visual thinker, and
Clearly. And it's very helpful. So I did put Greg's work into our discussion documents, and maybe Christina, we could throw those 4 documents up on the screen so we are at least looking at it. So Greg did histograms of the data. For some reason, you didn't do a couple of the wells, 2,
Yeah, yeah.
4.
yeah, if there was only 4 or 5, a histogram with 4 readings is
Yeah.
too much.
Well, here, let's.
I could expand, I certainly could expand that out.
So, before expanding anything out, we should just be clear about what it is we're looking at. And Christina, for a second, just go down to the data analysis at the bottom that Greg did. So here, Greg has just restated the same data we've been looking at. And he restated it in a nice way. To be picky, I wouldn't use blue. First of all, let me thank you also for dividing the 5 to 10 milligram range into an upper boundary and a upper 5 to 7.5 and a lower 5 to 7.5 and an upper 7.5 to 10. I think that's really a smart thing to do. I wouldn't use blue for the upper portion of that because it tends to suggest healthy.
Yeah.
Just the color-wise.
Red.
I would go yellow there, and then, or the closer you are to the red end, the the worse things are. Which is you did that for the highest level, and I think also consistency of the colors here and across into the histograms would ultimately be part of what we're doing. Just because we're really needing to be communicative.
Well, I do have colors. Red is above 10, right? And then I, just because of spacing and all that, I have grouped, really it's,
Right, no, I like the red and yellow you used on the histogram. So Christina, if you go to upwards now to the histograms. So then we should all understand what a histogram is. So what are each of these bars? Do you want to explain like how you?
what it does, it takes the numbers, it's an Excel feature, function. And what it basically does is takes, you put bins out and it takes the data that you've received and assigns them into different bins. And these are along the bottom there of each of the histograms, you can see the numbers. And it is how many, let's see, let's do zone 2 as an example here, which shows numbers that were above 10, and there's two numbers in zone 2 that are above 10.
red.
They're both listed. And we had one well for each of those numbers. Then the next
And
grouping,
also, Greg, helpfully for the red and yellow areas, meaning the upper level of that zone that we still technically call potable, but which we're very concerned about. And for above 10, which is technically non-potable water in terms of nitrogen, these are nitrogen numbers, milligrams per liter. He's very helpfully put the specific values at the top of each bar of the histogram. So in that zone 2, you have those two readings that are in that yellow 7.5 to 10 range, or actually it's 7.9 to 9.5 on the graph, which that's another interesting thing. But anyway, and they're 8.81 and 8.15 milligrams per liter.
So just so I can get what's
Get
going
your head
on.
around it. Yep.
Each one of these boxes represents a well.
that is cool.
So on the left, you see the number of wells being represented by each ball.
It lines up, with this page, if you think about it. If you look at that page, zone 2, you've got two reds, and those are the reds, and it
Yeah,
shows.
let's go to that page, Christina. So it's this other histogram page. So we're looking at zone 2, and the yellow bar is 2 houses high.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Great.
The yellow bar represents 2 houses. The 2 red bars each represent a house.
Awesome.
The tall pink bar represents 7 houses falling into that zone.
Oh, okay, so this is the number this is the number of wells on the utter left.
On the left is the number of houses or wells, yes.
Okay,
And then across the bottom are ranges,
yeah,
which I would think it would be nice to divide those ranges more in accordance to what you did with the numbers. That is 5 to 7.5, 7.5 to 10. It'd be nice to have the histogram correspond with the data a little more closely rather than be this, it's an odd, the breaks in the ranges are a little odd, 7.9 to 9.5.
Craig, did you use an auto range for the histogram?
Yes, I did, the Excel histogram.
So Excel.
Bell made the choice.
Yeah.
It does
Yeah.
it.
Right.
So just to clarify for my benefit, anything above 10 is bad, right?
Anything above 10 is EPA non-potable water.
But just as opposed to good.
It's certainly not good.
Okay. And yellow is,
So the yellow is the upper range of 5 to 10. Well,
I
it's
think
not
it-
exactly on
I
this
think it's
graph.
7.5. I broke the
On the
values.
data, it's blue actually on the data, but that range of the 5 to 10 is what Joe was calling actionable. 5 to 10 is what, so we actually cite data in the ground and surface water management plan around what does 5 to 10 milligrams mean. And what it means is 166% higher levels of bladder cancer, colorectal cancer, ovarian, we don't reference ovarian cancer.
we would say yellow is bad.
Yellow is certainly
Not as bad as red.
a homeowner, it's not as bad as red. It's not
But I think we should come out and say that.
non-potable, but well, I'm trying to, right? Also neural tube birth defects are
Yes, all
associated
that.
with the 5 to 10 milligram range. I don't know how to distinguish the 7.5 and up versus 5 to 7.5.
I don't think we need to split hairs on this.
Exactly.
it's
So-
high.
Right, we're in a range where people
Let's say that.
want to know what they're drinking and might want to make a decision about their behavior there as a result of that.
It's based on, Doug, exceeding 50% of the maximum. So once you cross 50% of the potability level, potability is 10. Once you exceed 5, the range you're in is considered the action zone, where you've got to, it's not unusable, but that's where, if we were particularly like a town, if it was a town building, the regulatory agency would say, you need to develop a plan for how you're going to address this. It's supposed to help you mitigate against a situation where you cross the threshold. So these plans take time to implement. Now you're in the action zone.
And the bias is it's headed in the wrong direction when it's above 5.
Right. So in terms of potability, as I'm sure, Andrew has experience with, you don't want to cross that threshold and then figure out how you're going to fix this. Because once you cross the threshold, it's not potable. So between 5 and 10, in the case of nitrates, that's your action zone. 10 is potability.
And in that action zone, you have a National Science Foundation association that has been established by multiple studies between various forms of cancer and birth defects with that 5 to 10 range. So, right, let's.
That sounds like an asterisk type of thing to me because,
Well, that's the same. It's not just for nitrates. That's the same for any,
right.
for any contaminant that once you exceed 50% of the allowable range, that's when you're in this zone. So it's not unique to what we're talking about here. But it's a general approach towards dealing with these types of tests. I think that's your sort of common sense as well. If your car, if the red lines on your RPM gauge start at 6, and you drove at 6 all the time, that's not good.
Right.
You don't want to be at the limit.
Right.
It's not to say you can't go there, but same approach.
So again,
So what I'm hearing then is that, that the two things, to take the histograms and modify the zone 5 to 10.
The range is so you get 5 to 7.5,
And that's fine.
10, 10 and up.
And also do-
lower ranges as well.
And do 1, 3, and 5, which is the three that are not.
And then I would say, just let's be careful to color code, so the closer you go to red, the hotter the color, the worse the number,
Yes.
right? So that we don't kind of confuse people. It's mostly you did that just in the graph, in the numbers on the last page,
It's more like
in
a
these
print-
numbers.
It's more like a printing problem.
Yeah, blue is probably not the right color to
Yeah,
choose for.
probably.
Yeah.
And I think also the colors on the watersheds, it could
I don't-
confuse it even more so.
Well, yeah, no, that was done separately. Now.
Oh, I understand that, but
I
I'm just
asked,
saying, when
I
you're trying to
asked
put all of
Christian.
this information together.
Questions about the, before we leave the data?
Yeah, and well, and I want to just integrate the map into the data, but go ahead.
Is there any third party
Mhm.
which identifies the 7.5, the 5 to 7.5 as a different category than the 7.5 to 10?
No, I think Greg made that choice.
Not that I'm aware of, yes.
Okay, so
Greg made, you could just use 5 to 10. 10 and up, 5 to 10, below. I mean, you could easily simplify.
As long as it's justifiable from a action.
there may be a benefit
Mhm.
of sticking to third-party designations
Okay.
as opposed to imposing our own. If the NIH studies you're talking about are all based on 5 and
5
up,
to 10. 5 to 10 is,
and they don't use 7.5,
nope.
the MCL is 10,
Yep,
the action level starts at 5.
yep.
To me, we may be
Studying things.
adding more precision than is necessary
Mhm.
by putting the 7.5 in.
So
By putting it in, or?
In other words, by having,
by breaking
Division
out
in.
the yellow from the yellow and blue here,
5, keep it at 5.
I think it's a good reference, though.
you're in the upper half, you're in the lower half.
Yeah,
It-
I mean,
it
I think
sort of
it's-
speaks to me too.
It could
but
be
it's,
just incremental and not necessarily,
Doesn't have to be colored different if you put it on.
Yes.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
Which, you do, it's true, you have certain bars that are the same color, lower bars, you tended to color the same.
This is for our purposes, isn't it, though? For really-
Well, let's ask ourselves what, partly we're trying to understand.
Right.
So, we're trying to be clear about it. It would be easier to understand if we had imposed a histogram on the section of the map. And potentially you could see recoloring the map so that its color corresponds with some sort of an alert level as well, and isn't just a random division of color. But if you just eliminate the color, now I also asked for Christina to print out the version of the map that had more landmarks, like all of the restaurants, which might not want to be on any official document that we put out. But I just thought for us, it's nice to know where the pizzeria and the seafood shop is and everything on this map,
I think so.
just in terms of understanding what it is we're looking at.
Peter, I'd recommend instead of the landmarks, we just move to a satellite version so that you don't get a pin on the specific place, rather
Absolutely,
folks
absolutely.
can see their neighborhood and, if you happen to know where that place is.
I
Again,
just wonder about any kind of feedback or backlash from having these.
The maps?
Yeah, like having Commander
The
Cody's
Cody's-
Fish Shop.
Oh, I totally, I agree.
I agree, in any published, right,
Yeah.
this is internal.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm also not sure what do you know, Meg, what the blue lines were? Does anyone know?
Yeah, the blue lines are the watersheds.
Watershed
Those are
division?
watersheds, yeah.
Okay. All right, so our zones are overlapping watersheds.
The zones are kind of based on the directionality and flow from the watershed. So when I did it, you'll notice there's a blue line and then the sections don't actually correspond directly to the blue line because when we had the water testing done in the center and we had the modeling done, it showed that the line is a little over when they did our modeling. So I kind of was variable, but I went with, this is the line, so the water's gonna go to either side. So
Generally
the
speaking.
Generally,
the
yeah.
spaces go to either side.
Yeah.
And like the buildings, so we know from the modeling that was done that the town buildings flow a certain direction. So I created that watershed section, that block, to incorporate the town buildings, knowing the direction of their flow. And then from there, I based it off of the watershed lines. So that's why it looks the way it looks.
So again, I mean, I do feel like, we're not just trying to communicate with ourselves. We're trying to communicate with the board members, we're trying to communicate with the community. So I do think that taking these histograms and the data, integrating them with the map, being very careful in choices of color and in range.
I can tell you
Start
that
to have a document.
Instagram's on here.
Yeah.
Find somebody to do that. I can't.
How you're gonna,
How to float them in there?
with color, I mean, really, is color on color unless you just get rid of the
Well, no,
colors.
I don't know that we need the colors even on this map, we just need the one.
Colors. Those are just to help people understand the concept in the first place, but now it can get modified and refined, and it can just be black and white with the numbers for the blocks, so we can color
Right.
if we need to, but
And then the
let's
graphs.
just
That
have
would- that would be
averages in
maybe-
each section for what the average is for that area.
Those
And
are
then with the
versions.
high-low, the low was, the high was. in
So
each
it
section.
may not be necessary to put the histogram color coding on here. Keep that the
It
color
might be-
and just put the reference table somewhere in that.
It may not be necessary to do the histogram.
Might be the average or,
Reference number.
you could use the reference numbers, why not?
Just the reference
Yeah,
numbers
that
in
could be
either black and
adequate.
white
I think
without,
so.
without mapping.
the values.
color.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
keep
put the values as sort of like what we're looking at here.
Yeah, the zone is on zone 1, zone 2, whatever.
But it feels to me that this wants to become a statement from us. About,
My intention on both of these pieces was to say, okay, we know that we're going to be communicating out to the public, here's what we see. And we want to have it as consumable as possible. Not that everything I ever do is consumable.
well, it took some exciting
So,
histogram is.
I know the two things. What I shall do is take a couple of these, change the range from they'll be above 10, 5 to 10, and then less than 5, so that you'll wind up with three colors on here, and that's what we have on the histograms right now, really.
Right.
So basically, we'll bring that in alignment, which should help everybody. I don't know what the zone 1, 2, and 3, or 1, 3, and 5 will look like, but I can get them done. And in terms of tying the colors onto here, I mean, it says zone 2 at the top.
We're tying the histogram.
It's a, in order to get 3, 9, and 10 to have different identifiable colors, I don't know that I can do that. I mean, or if I could do it, you know, it's going to take a lot of time.
Right.
So, you know, if it says zone 2 at the top and you see that zone 2, I think the importance of those histogram bars looking like the color that's in 2. I'm not sure that I believe that would make it easier for people to comprehend.
Coloring the zones.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm not, and the question I also had was whether we actually literally present zones on top of a map. I mean, histograms on top of a map. I'm not sure that's a helpful
I don't
thing
think
either.
that's, yeah.
I'm sorry, see?
So literally having a map with histogram with its no colors,
Yeah,
but histograms
No,
on the area.
I don't believe I can do that. I don't know how to do that.
Or just,
If
The graphic arts can be accomplished if we want to, if it's helpful. We're not sure it's helpful yet.
if I received this in the mail,
Right.
first thing I would do is I would go to the map
Mhm.
and I would find my zone where I lived.
Mhm.
So let's say I lived in zone 4.
Mhm.
And I think there are 3 numbers relevant to zone 4.
Mhm.
How many tests were taken? 4 numbers. How many tests were taken? How many flunked? How many were at the action level? And how many were fine in zone 4? And if I lived in zone 7, I would want to know those same 4 numbers. If I had my water,
You'd be okay about flipping one page to another page to see.
but I would put those numbers on the map
yes.
In a box.
In a box.
In the zone.
in the zone.
One more suggestion, Andrew, the total number of residences in that box, so that they have a sense of how many tests were taken from
Fine.
total residents.
Okay. And s-
Good. I'm liking what you keep going.
the advantage of that
Mhm.
is that the data that's presented to the customer or to the citizen
Mhm.
is linking to our actual count in terms of number of residences, our actual count in terms of number of tests, and the performance under the tests is keyed into the EPA
Mhm. Standards
standards, period. So there's not a lot of interpretation.
going on.
Or judgment.
It's just data.
Good. Do we even need the histograms though?
I think the histograms are useful for us.
Mhm.
I think because we had to have a conversation to refresh ourselves about what a histogram was, that it's probably not
Useful for the general public.
useful for a mailing to everybody living in the triangle. Yep.
Mhm. Or, you know, some sort of statement document on our part. No, we don't know where we're going with all of this yet.
Right.
Okay, I tend to agree with Andrew. I mean, do other people?
Having those 4 numbers, I think you just said,
Yes.
right? You know, having those on this is the cliff notes, and that's what most people need.
Yes.
No.
Yeah. And what they're,
I
what
don't do that, though, so.
someone's going to do is find which zone they're in.
Mhm.
When you get the letter,
Yep.
you don't care what the average is. You know, you just want to know, where do I live? Oh, what happened?
Okay, so.
I think what's key, excuse me, is
Yeah.
what you're saying is it's consumable. You want to make this as easy for people to understand as possible.
You know, as Andrew says, you know, somebody says, I live in 6, and, oh, okay, boy, 9 people failed out of 18, that's 50-50. You know, now, let me read on and find out what I should do. Okay, that's good. You know, I guess, Meg, I guess you put the table together, right? That map, so.
Yeah, Meg,
And all of those numbers are basically here.
It's already.
We can arrange it however we want. I think what is important for everyone to do is figure out exactly what information we want to communicate to the public, and then figure out the cleanest, simplest way to do that so that it's easily understood by a broad spectrum of people.
And I
So
think Andrew said it.
avoiding complicated graphs, I think putting just basic numbers, pass, fail, in the warning zone, or whatever, however you want to word it, actional zone, whatever, but it has to be clearly defined, it has to be simple.
Okay, so so that's the map.
That's the map.
A letter goes along with it,
Correct.
and the letter said, we ran this testing program, summarized the number of tests that were taken, number of people in the whole area, and then we need to get to the implications of the results.
Exactly.
That is what's most important. So So people who are living in these various areas can make an informed decision about what they're going to do.
Correct. So one other thing, before we let go of the data and the map for 1 second, there is a separate piece, which is we were testing for coliforms.
Yes.
And we have a certain number that failed in terms of coliforms as well. That probably also should be included in this simplified presentation. But I think that we're all pretty much in agreement about what the simplified presentation is. It's on the map with a very few numbers.
I think coliforms could confuse people. A lot of the time, if your well is contaminated with coliform, it's not necessarily coming from the groundwater. It's coming into the wellhead somehow. So it's not an indicator of groundwater quality. It's more an indicator of the health of your well, maybe the age of your well, whether it's had trauma, someone hit it with a mower, mice have been getting in there. So I think coliform could confuse people when it comes to the
You would rather
water,
just stick with the
groundwater
nitrogen
quality.
information.
I would stick with nitrogen.
Take this chance to, some of these questions I think already started to get to. So I have a summary table here with all of the data that we just described. This is the basic footnotes version that you talked about with coliform counts,
Right.
total number of tests.
Circulated.
So I've circulated this, and this is the updated
Yeah.
one, town building data. Then I also created a base map where the zones are ranked. I don't have enough copies here for everybody, but so this map has the satellite image, which I think is helpful for everybody because you can see major landmarks, but you can't necessarily see buildings, and folks can actually see their neighborhood through the satellite image and see their house perhaps and see where they fit within the zone, if they're near a border or right in the middle.
I like that.
And then I also created a base map version that's just a summary, which includes your highs, lows, and your average for your given zone.
Yeah.
Lovely. And I have histograms separately that are similar to what Craig did. We can use that for a discussion at a subsequent meeting, but ultimately histograms just set the bin count. So instead of a randomly assigned level that Excel chooses for each zone's histogram is in the same bin. So there's a total count from 0 to 2.5, 2.5 to 5, and that standardizes it. But I felt that generally is a little bit overwhelming to disseminate to the public. So I think that's best suited for our individual needs. The data that you have there in the summary table from Excel, that includes all of the town building and any associated test data that I had as of a reasonable time period to correlate with this testing effort. So I didn't include test nitrogen data on town buildings from 5 years ago because I didn't feel that was within the same amount of time. We specifically took these tests in the summer, which is when the nitrate level seems to be at the highest anyway. So I kept any inclusion of town data in that same zone, within the last 18 months or so, and within the same time of year, so that they were as best correlated as possible. A few important things to take away from this. So this particular map here, the numbers, the red numbers, are not the zone number. And this map is the ranking from worst to least in terms of total average nitrogen for the given zone. So I think this is helpful for people to just look at because their zone nobody really cares what their zone number is. They just care, what the data says about their given zone. And I think this one's really helpful for discussion because in the satellite imagery, you get a sense within a given zone of what the development is like in the area. And because all the zones are different sizes, they represent a much larger piece of the aquifer in some sections than in others. And when you look at that next to how they rank, I think you would get a really good sense of where the nitrate levels are worst. The ranking zone here, coincidentally, is one of the largest in terms of land mass, yet has the highest average nitrogen. And when you look closely at it, you'll see the development is only in a fraction of the zone.
Yes.
Right. So this particular area
That fraction would be very bad.
right. And those are the types of conclusions that I'm trying to take away visually from looking at our data set. The development is limited to this very small section for the most part. This whole section of the zone is open space, the horse farm, down gradient of the landfill. So we actually know that probably no tests were even taken over there because there's no houses to even take.
Right.
This zone also, as you see on the satellite, is just adjacent to Fisk Field and the school and the town center. And what we know from our other groundwater flow modeling is more or less the direct path of the nitrogen contributions from town buildings here in the center, and then probably compounded by the relative high density and legacy type development that's been there. This area is not of recent development. Those homes are fairly old. And they're also in an area which we know has a generally slow groundwater flow travel time. So looking at these rankings, I think you get a clear sense that one, our understanding of how water flows from the center is fairly well validated. This supports the flow paths that we were modeling as part of the center wastewater study. This also generally tells us that these higher density areas in the center continue to be our problem. We have 1, 2, and 3 all right next to each other. And quite arguably, when you look at the average numbers, most of them are fairly well correlated. So it's not to say that, we see a huge jump from this section to the others. We also see this interesting piece here about 13, the lowest ranking, the lowest nitrogen levels, is the only zone that's materially isolated from the rest of the aquifer. This section had a few tests in it, but it's on the other side of Menantic Creek, which we know isolates the groundwater flow from the center. So this here is, I think, somewhat of a smoking gun in telling us that many of these other test results are all interrelated. And in the few cases where we had an opportunity to see what's happening in an isolated section, we get very, very low results, even though there's still quite a bit of density over here. And arguably, there's other contributions to this area that are from outside the zone. But this one being the lowest, I think, is very telling. It's very telling of our approach, of our assumptions that we're making.
Juxtaposition of highest and lowest across Menantic Creek.
Right.
It's very telling.
That's terrific.
This one, I thought this zone up here, I forget which zone it actually is, but the number 4 ranking zone was probably more of a surprise to me. 4 and 8, I would have presumed that these were perhaps reversed. But nonetheless, I think their averages are more about in line. The ranking maybe didn't do it justice as to what the conditions are. When you look at the average ratings for those zones, they tend to support, I think, their proximity from the center. And it also supports what we already knew about these other areas being further down gradient, yet still having some isolated pockets of nitrogen contamination. And this is how I hope to present this to the public. I think we can play with the fonts and the layout a little bit, but in terms of discussion here, those are probably
Simplest.
my most critical findings, from a 30,000 foot elevation. I had some notes here.
Can I just offer one suggestion? If I didn't understand the flow and this was going to the public, I would like to have some kind of arrows indicative of how the water flows. Because we understand where the water flows, but not everybody does.
Although there are limits to the amount that we understand it, we do understand
Well, to some
it.
degree, we have a good idea, but I don't know if that would confuse.
That's a good point, Lisa. And I think my instinct is that perhaps that should be a separate map rather than an overlay, because what I think is happening in some of these sections is that, sure, it's influenced by what's happening maybe in the adjacent zone, but some of these sections are probably self-contained. Some of these test results, it's safe to assume, are not elevated because the water the nitrogen came from, a mile away and then made its way to them. It might be because their neighbor's septic system just happens to be close to their well, and they have a very localized influence of nitrogen. And that, I think, is another important takeaway, is that the nitrate levels that we see in this test don't necessarily mean that, if you live here or if you live here, you always have all of this influence coming to you. There could be a very isolated, parcel by parcel influence that's causing your test to be elevated or high. So I don't want to make the conclusion that, elevated nitrates in here are exclusively because of groundwater flow.
Right.
But I do think that groundwater flow is very relevant, particularly, the phenomenon and the test results that we have happening over here. So I see your point, and I agree. I would just hesitate to put it in the context for someone to perceive that that's what's causing the ranking.
I think there's a difference. We are, in our conversation, we are separating what we're trying to communicate to the public, quote unquote, and what we're doing for our own purposes internally. And I do think that one of the takeaways for me is that I would like to see more flow mapping done. I would like to understand, and particularly in some detail, that is, where we have, it would appear to me that there are zones in which nitrogen is being funneled. It could be very locally, the 20 helms around a certain valley area, and nitrogen is now being concentrated on its way into the head of Menanta Creek or whatever, wherever you take a look. We did really interesting mapping, and what we saw was we could see not only where wastewater was going from the center area horizontally, but also vertically. And that's of interest to well drill, people putting in new wells. You want to change the results. We had Jay comment to us, it may be a matter of raising or lowering your well. The more we can x-ray the ground and see in 3 dimensions wastewater flows, the better off we're going to be. And the mod flow model that the USGS puts out directly implies that. It should be a computer should be able to get all the lines from every single house, and every intake as well, lines going to every intake. And, it shouldn't be more expensive to do every single bit of that spaghetti of where flow goes. And boy, that would be important information for, mitigation measures that people might take, actual engineering work that could be done, how you can avoid having intakes that are pulling in 7 to 10 milligrams of nitrogen. So again, I would just, strongly suggest that internally for our purposes, wanting to do more mod flow mapping is,
if I could, I think that, I don't think these two formats, these two can exist in the same report. The fact that this number 9 is not the same as this number 9. I think if that shows up in a report, I think it's going to be a baffler.
Yeah.
The
The zones
thing,
are arbitrary. We can change, we can call them a letter if we want. It doesn't really matter.
This is the one.
that would
Yeah.
conceivably work. But having this, and what does letting people know that they're in a less an area, because all the areas have numbers that are, except there's only 13 is the only one that doesn't have doesn't have an issue. Is there any benefit in telling some zones, the people in some zones, that you don't have if you want to have a problem, you should look at those guys over in that next zone? What do you achieve by ranking zones? Is my question, I guess, because I don't see it
The rank
myself.
isn't really for an award, I suppose. It's just to give a sense of scale. Color coding, I think, is hard to present. And I also think it's unfair to color code somebody red and somebody purple. The rank is just a way to relate them to each other, because, I don't want to assign someone a color and they either misinterpret that as this is a catastrophe or a crisis, or somebody looks at, they got a medium purple and they're not sure what that means,
You don't want to be Mr. Pink.
honestly, we don't need either rank. I mean, it's useful for us, but we don't need either color coding or ranking. What Andrew was pointing out is that when you open up this package, you're going to look at your zone and you're going to see, okay, here was the testing, here's how many failed in my neighborhood, here's how many tests were taken, 50% are in the action zone.
Yeah.
And that information, so getting as clean as we can and as little as we can, that just gives people the ability to see that. Now, that still begs the question Andrew was trying to ask, and I think Doug was trying to ask, which is, So what are the recommendations? What do you do? How do you evaluate?
Peter, let me just finish my segment here because I have a couple more notes. To answer that question, I think the data is quite clear. We have the majority of tests in the action level. So, the takeaway is it's time for action. There are a number of failed tests for a couple of reasons, either high nitrates or, coliform, whatever other categories are in the summary table. I think there's any other categories with
We had
high
ammonia
levels of failures.
in section 9.
So there's a couple, and those folks all received notifications about their specific test results, specific failures, and those people are hopefully engaging with some sort of professional to help remedy that. But looking at the data more broadly, when the majority of tests fall in this action zone, I think that's the call for action. The takeaway here is that we don't have a widespread crisis today, but we do have a sizable number of tests that have failed. 10% of the nitrate tests that we took failed. They were above the, so that's significant. And it's significant when you consider that we looked at 160 tests. That's, less than half of the total number of households in the area. So, the count of tests that failed maybe doesn't strike someone as alarming, but if you extrapolate that over all of the wells, that is
It's the extrapolation.
The third.
It
So it's the
amount,
times numbers
Yeah.
that we
That
have.
doesn't mean these folks have no options. There are lots of options that are low cost and achievable for them. But as a township, that's my takeaway, is that we need to develop, if we are going to take an interest in remedying this problem, if we feel there's a sense of responsibility, now is the time to develop a policy on how we will approach these particular issues.
Okay, Joe, I just want to comment that we speak to the town board and the town as an organization, and we obviously are also having to speak to the individuals of the town. And so when we talk about action, taking action, there's collective action and there's individual actions.
Right. Well, I'm being vague on purpose. If I'm a homeowner that just got my test back that said I failed my nitrate, my action is very, I'm taking action, but my action there as an individual is very different than if I got this test result that said, I have no problem necessarily. So action, I think, is somewhat tailored to the stakeholder here. If you're one of these test-taking homeowners, you may have a particular action to take right now. Action as a township is understanding what is our role going to be here. These folks have private wells. Arguably, we have no obligation, to fix it, to provide them with a potable water solution. However, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a policy on how to address this. Our folks in given neighborhoods, they have the opportunity to develop a localized water system, so they so choose. We have no legislation that bans them from doing one thing or forces them to do another.
Again, not speaking legislatively or even in terms of, a grant to do a particular project. In talking to homeowners, I feel, people should, my neighbor has put in a point of view system, pretty expensive one that Goldman provided and gave them their recommended package. I, for years, have been drinking Poland Spring bottled water that I buy at the IGA. Which of those, I personally, people ask me personally, I have 7 milligrams of nitrogen. My neighbors ask me, my test showed 7 milligrams, 7.2 milligrams, 6.9. What should I be doing? And I have to say, bottled water, a system like that, point of view.
Okay.
And I feel like we need to develop clarity about what we want to say.
There's two important points I'd like to make about that. One, I don't think we're in a position as a committee to advise folks, what to do about if they have a given nitrogen level. My advice would be to speak to, a water professional who can help advise on what filtration options, could be provided to them. But I think reflecting back on what is our action, we have this test data, but we also have the center aquifer model that we used to study mass balance. How much nitrogen do we put into the ground every year from our activity here, atmospheric deposition, versus how much nitrogen gets flushed out through the inherent dynamic abilities of the aquifer, right? So we know that based on how much we're putting in, that concentration levels of nitrogen are going up. We also see that validated through historic testing data. So when we look at being in the action level now, or the majority, just barely the majority being in the action level now, and we combine that with our understanding, our current modeling, mass balance modeling, we know that action, that majority, that small majority is likely to increase. So in the do nothing scenario, we've modeled the nitrate concentrations in our aquifer, and we understand that we're putting in more every year than we can get rid of. And we now have this somewhat comprehensive test data of all these wells in the center, and they're in the middle, arguably just over where we'd like to see them. And if we do nothing, we should expect those to continue to worsen. So we're in a situation where we have a pretty good level of confidence. If we do nothing, nitrogen levels will continue to rise. So I think that influences how we approach, the action level. It's a pretty clear call to do something, otherwise the condition will worsen.
My thought here, in looking at both of these diagrams of the numbers and things divided up the way they are, is great for us. But I'm wondering if we should focus on more as nothing without those lines in, it just being the center, which is really our focus.
Sorry,
Pardon?
say again?
I was hoping the lines and the way we divided the center up is good for us in our testing and the way that they, distributed the information and so on, how we're analyzing it. From the standpoint of presenting it, I'm wondering if we should not break up this into these segments and sections and just have it as the center with the data that we have.
In other words, simplify it to a
And
single volume.
basically, because like everyone has said, oh, I live here and I'm happy. It's not, I don't have an issue here in essence from this, or I live here and I shouldn't be happy.
I would agree with you, Ken, except that the data shows there are hotspots here that are not, if we broadly brush the center, I think it's to some areas that, there are some zones here where the average and all of the tests are quite low. And there are other areas where there are high tests, but the influence of those high tests isn't quite.
Maybe we should just then focus on and enumerate and illustrate those areas as such and not break up the other pieces as such to kind of simplify the divisions.
Just out of curiosity, why do you think this is complicating? I mean, I think it's great information.
It's good for us, I'm saying. What we're trying to do is focus on the issue in the center, in my mind, and the fact that in the long run, we could have issues here relative to the light load.
Well, and also this is where the water is. In the nearshore area, we're not going to be putting any significant wells. We're not going to be.
You don't have the issue.
We have a separate issue there that we do need to focus on. It's our next item on the agenda.
Right.
But we also have a couple of people who have their hands up here.
So I do have one question, excuse me, Peter.
Okay, go ahead.
And that is, did you take these high readings and plot them so that you had a picture of the island with, dots, red dots, whatever color you like?
The addresses.
I don't know where they are,
So we don't have the addresses.
No,
unless it's
Anonymized.
it's an area.
unless it's a town building. Yeah, the zones are the highest level of precision that I have in terms of knowing where the test result
Maybe
is.
that's what-
And we had
So
to
I'm-
do it by zone.
So I'm just saying, it just seems to me that if you really wanted to see these zones we were just talking about, they're not straight lines. They're a series of test results.
This is testing.
And those would, they'd be very intense and then they'd spread out less so.
Yeah.
If you got away from the area.
I literally know from my own personal zone, you mentioned that you look at your own zone. From my personal zone, those 4 highest ratings, I know which buildings they are. Because I know those people. I know what they got, I know what they,
Right.
So, and I can see that there is a funneling effect going on. They're very close together, those
But
buildings.
when we start to think about solutions here,
For the big
Mhm.
picture.
Then you need the specificity.
Which is why I was talking about flow mapping still being important to us. Again, I would though like to, since people have been so kind to quietly keep their hands up, briefly, Stephen and Stella, Stephen first, if you could, you do want to comment, I know.
Just a question, not a comment.
Okay.
I'm just wondering what, if any, testing is planned to verify the assumption that things are going to be continuing to get worse despite the installation of the IA system at the school and elsewhere around the island?
The mass balance model that I mentioned is updated to include the new installations of IA systems, and can be adjusted to model all of those scenarios where the school system's been replaced or any number of systems on a given year is put into the center. So all of those wastewater changes are included in the model.
So
But it
yes,
wouldn't-
Stephen,
it
you're
wouldn't
right.
make
though.
sense
It wouldn't-
to retest, particularly some of the most troubling tests, to see, in fact, whether there's a difference next summer or, this summer.
I'm not sure I understand the purpose of that. It's just to validate last year's data or what?
Well, no, to validate your model.
I don't think that you'd expect to see that type of accuracy captured on a 1-year basis.
But Stephen, we certainly plan to be doing this every decade. Water flows very, very slowly underground. So we, our work, we will be repeating the baseline studies that we did from 2016 to 2019 and 2026 through 2029, I assume. So we'll be getting a lot more data than just nitrogen and coliform.
And I'd say that's actually, one of the key benefits of the model is the ability to sequence certain scenarios, however many IA systems went in today versus, a goal of IA systems sometime in the future. It's just simply looking at the mass of nitrogen that enters the aquifer every year versus what exits. So, we can see what this looks like in 10 or 20 years versus, waiting for the.
And in terms of the mass balance model, sorry, Greg, I'm just going to make this brief comment. I've heard it said, and I didn't validate it myself, but that the model indicates that you basically need to get all of the homes onto advanced systems before you're really truly bending the curve, or 90% of your home.
Quite a few, yeah, quite a few. And that was why we ran it with the center buildings, because it's all based on flow, so the more, if you have an institution like the town that has 5 buildings with a sizable amount of flow, changing their output has a bigger impact.
When was I don't recall, and maybe it's just because I forgot or I missed that meeting. Is that something that you issue to the town board and say, okay, WAC, here's the analysis that you've done in the mass balance? Should I know where that is, I guess,
Balance model.
available?
I don't think, well, it's been used to evaluate a couple of different conditions. It's not a tool that is like simple to use or attractive like a web-based model. It's an Excel calculation that John Cronin developed that we refined as part of the center wastewater study. So we can.
Is it in the center wastewater documents? I don't recall.
The outputs are, but the model itself it isn't. No.
Okay, so the outputs I would look into.
We can run the whole thing for you if you want. It's not. Yeah. It's not like classified
Right, okay.
calculation or anything.
Yeah, it would be, I think that would be interesting
Yeah,
to I think it would help us in terms of somebody saying, forget it, I'm out of here, and put their house up at a low rate. I mean, it can be, and it's being resolved through IA systems. And if anything, this may provide the town board with a little more leverage to say, you know, we really should be pushing people a little harder.
to on.
And people need
their
to be
septic
pushed
system.
harder in order to try and get this curve, get this thing turned.
I want to get Stella. She's had her hand up for a while.
Hi, guys. Thanks, Peter. I
problem.
just was wondering, as you're collecting inputs, if it would be helpful for what a water district needs to do. As you may or may not know, we're responsible for putting out an annual water quality report. And in that water quality report, if nitrates hit the over the half of the maximum contaminant level, so the 5 range, we would have to put in our reports a paragraph that talks about what the risk is. And the way that it's written, it's a very short paragraph. It's, if you could just let me read it, it says nitrate in drinking water at levels above 10 is a health risk for infants of less than 6 months of age. High nitrate levels in drinking water can cause blue baby syndrome. Nitrate levels may rise quickly for a short period of time because of rainfall or agricultural activity. If you're caring for an infant, you should ask for advice from your healthcare provider. So that's what New York State would require somebody to put in their report. And they don't. So the question that Andrew asked, are there different levels between 5 and 10? No. Once you tip over 5, that goes into your report. And I just also think it's important, the statement that talks about rainfall and agricultural activity, even though the water might travel slowly, I would be supportive of doing this annual testing to see shifts, or more frequent testing than every 10 years, only because we see fluctuations in our nitrate levels year to year. So I just kind of leave you with that level of what New York State requires as a disclosure.
That's good. I personally, I'm aware that the reason the 10 milligram level was set was because of the evidence that it caused blue baby syndrome. I think that since that time, there's though that is your legal boilerplate that you have to put in place. There are other things that I feel like it would be important to communicate about. Elevated instances of cancer and neural tube defects are not reasons why that the 10 milligram level was established. And the fact that they show up at 5 to 10 milligrams seems relevant to me. That all of that said, I'm very appreciative of, I too agree that we should be testing as much as we can possibly and getting as much information as we can. And I don't reject Stephen's comment that, testing often is important.
And I think-
One last question. Has there been any correlation on the dates of the tests versus the rainfall on those dates?
Well,
No,
we
we have
have
the rainfall
not,
data.
although again, these are tests of well water as opposed to, like beach areas, runoff areas. So
I don't have the dates of the tests either. I don't think that was.
No, we don't have the exact dates of when each test was conducted. We do know the range, like the month that they were conducted in, but we don't know the exact dates.
intended to be a dry month.
Yes.
Right. Okay, but so again, there's clearly, we all feel that taking action is important. I'm not sure that we're not taking action. This, as Stephen pointed out, the school system was put in place. That's a good step. People will continue to be installing advanced septic systems. Nevertheless, in putting out this data, I feel like it's important to ask the question, should an individual be putting in a point of view system? Should an individual be drinking bottled water? I think those are important questions for people.
I think this communication,
Mm-hmm.
because the testing was voluntary,
Mm-hmm.
the communication needs to go to every resident in the whole triangle,
Mm-hmm.
not just the people who had their water tested.
Mm-hmm. As did the offer to
Right.
do the testing.
I think it also needs to go to people who are renting properties as well as people who are owning properties.
Mhm.
Because the landlord and the tenant may have different reactions. And the tenant is drinking the water and the landlord isn't, unless the landlord lives nearby.
And there might be some requirement of the landlord to post or put the
Right.
notification so that, their renters know what's in the water they're drinking. And
It
they
seems to
might
me that
should
we're
make a
trying to
choice.
figure out what is our responsibility.
Okay, so,
Okay, so that is like, what is our responsibility?
all right, so to answer that question, I think there's a difference between what we have to do, and these are private wells, they're not the town wells,
Right, we understand
and what we should do.
what we should do.
And I think we need to lean towards what we should do rather than what we have to do. But I would recommend that the town be advised by its attorney as to, throughout this whole process. Okay? So that inadvertently, in the interest of trying to do something properly, we don't slip up.
Right.
Okay? The town doesn't slip up. So I think that, but I can see a communication going to everybody in this area that says, this is the number of people who lived here. These are the number of tests that were taken. You can see the results on the map that's attached to this paper.
Mhm.
I don't have any problem changing the number designations on the districts to either do them in rank order of the way Joe
However we
did,
show it visually.
right? And that in each one of these districts, because that's the best data we have, we don't know where the individual testing locations were. In each one of these districts, we show those 5 numbers.
Right.
Those 5 numbers being the number in the number of people in the district, the number of tests taken, the number flunked, the number at the action level, and the number that are clean.
But do you then say to people,
Then I think the communication says,
Hmm.
these are the implications of consuming water at these different levels. So if you're worried about being over 10, this is where the EPA has set the maximum contaminant level and why it has. And if you're between 5, and if you're over 5,
Mhm.
that's called an action level, and explain what that's for. And also reference the health concerns associated with consuming water at those levels.
referenced in the GWSMP? So the question is, this is
Yeah, there's a-
not a non-controversial thing.
I
to
know, but I think that, there's a communication job in there, but someone needs to express that science, the conclusions of that science,
Mhm.
in a way that a average person can understand. In terms of who, let me keep going. I think the next section of the letter says, these are the various things you can do. You can install a point of use system. You can buy bottled water. You can keep consuming the water that you're consuming, personal choice. And then I think, and we need to reference work that the town is doing about addressing this problem I don't think we're talking about long-term. I think we're talking about short to medium term. I think this is a serious issue. I think it's important that the communicator, the person who, the content of the letter and the content of the presentations that are made to the town board, and the content of the presentations that are made to individuals in various meetings, all are really tightly lined up.
Mhm.
So that the colors and the zone designations and so forth that are in the letter line up with the presentation that you're making. So that when an individual who receives this letter then comes into a community meeting that you're hosting, that the language that you're using and the graphics that you're using
Super clear.
are super clear and line up with what they've received in the mail. So if you, and I think the town needs to decide who's going to do the communicating, who the face is of this issue. If you're the face of the issue, you need to be presenting the data in a way that you're most comfortable with to be credible and genuine, as opposed to like taking it from somebody else. And that you need to have a very strong role in writing the letter so that it's all pretty seamless from the standpoint of the person who is receiving it. It can't be like Joe standing there and going, well, I got this letter and what is zone,
Yeah.
it's all got to get
Okay, but
linked up.
again, we have brass tacks here. Do we reference cancer? Are we referencing?
We're in a public meeting and we've already referenced it.
I know,
So that's done.
but again, we're talking about a drafting process.
Yes, there's a drafting process and exactly because in preparation for this meeting, I started looking through a lot of that stuff. And, it's correlation. It's not tight science.
Right? It's on a population level, there's an elevated chance.
Correct. It's probabilities. It needs to be expressed that way. The MCL, the maximum contaminant level, which is really kind of the hardest
Number you have.
number we've got, that's been through a regulatory process at the federal level, the product of the interaction of water purveyors, public and private, environmental groups, public health groups, and the EPA through a federal regulatory process. That's where that 10 MCL came from. Okay?
And then that's what, Stella read us
Yeah. And that's
language she's required to use. And
It's-
the safest thing is to use that language, but it doesn't reference some of the concerns we have.
actually in this very polarized world we live in. The regulation around safe drinking water is a wonderful example of bipartisan collaboration. And it's worked since 1986 when these amendments came through in the Safe Drinking Water Act. And it's a very well-established, credible process. And it has produced the 10 milligrams per liter for an MCL, and the letter ought to
And
reference
the
that.
action level as well,
Yes.
which says,
Right.
we're required to tell you that this information,
Right.
given that we were at the, so,
So I think, okay, now we got personal opinion here. Whether we are legally obligated to write this letter and send it around to all these people who own private wells, I don't know.
I think we're not legally obligated.
Okay. I believe that we should, because these people are our neighbors or ourselves, and we are all on one island and we are all on one community, we are all one community. And can we all get together and address an issue that is affecting a significant percentage of the people who live here? That's personal opinion. I'd write the letter and I'd outline it in those
Well,
words.
you put two things out there, and I'd like to see, if we have consensus?
Fine.
Because that's the easiest way to vote, is if everybody already agrees. Do we all agree that a letter should go out reviewing the results of this data and the implications of this data in some fashion to be carefully drafted?
From the committee.
From us?
Yeah.
Correct. Do we agree that that's something, or do we even have authority to do that? Or from the town, that we should recommend
Well,
I
draft it
think
for the town to
You're
send out?
asking us to agree to take that next step, and then when it goes to the
Or to recommend
town,
that the step be
Well,
taken?
then it's the
It's a
attorney's.
town-funded test, basically, and that's the start of this whole thing.
Okay, so let me rephrase the question. Without getting into who sends it, okay? Because that, to me, is a legal question as to whether
Whether it's
the board
town
sends it, or
or-
Joe sends it, or this committee sends it, I don't know. Should a letter outlined as, consistent with my outline, should a letter like that go out to all the people in the zone?
Drafted to be sent to everybody in the zone. That's what I'm asking. Do we have anybody, let me ask, are there any objections to is everybody in agreement?
I thought it's one of the reasons why we did this study,
Okay.
was so we could send
Okay.
that letter.
So we're in agreement. Let me take a
Take a motion.
Okay, let's do this as why don't you say it?
All right, I recommend
motion.
make a motion that a letter be sent to all of the residents in the so-called triangle,
Esther,
whether or not their water was actually tested, to the effect, I'm not going to go through all of what I just went through. It's on the
You don't
table.
need to.
It's on the table.
just a letter.
Yeah, so all in favor?
Aye.
But the motion does not say who, is that correct?
Doesn't say, so,
It doesn't say who is to send the letter.
It needs to be communicated.
right.
We have the recommendation that a letter be sent around this data to everybody in the zone. The second question I have is volunteers to be on a committee to draft. Okay, we got
I
it.
mean, yeah, okay.
Okay, our whole committee. So between sessions, we're going to start email discussion, drafting.
Okay, so who's got the pen? You want to take the pen?
No.
Want me to take the pen?
I would like, Andrew, if you would volunteer to
You've got
take an
the
initial
concept,
stab at it and then
I'll circulate a draft.
distribute, and then people can.
Can I just make one recommendation? Whatever graphic you use, I think that there needs to be some reference, two landmarks, because I can't necessarily
Not
see
sure where you are.
where I am from this. So just a Route 114,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
just something a little bit clearer. That's
We
all.
might be able to merge satellite,
Set up when time comes.
given technology. Pam Demarest has had her hand up. Pam, again, I'm the type, but if you.
Yeah, no, this is just a quick suggestion, because I was looking at the zones and how the initial map was put out and how you divided the zones into odd shaped sections, shall we say? And when you try to overlap these zones onto a satellite map or a GIS map, they don't line up to any streets. So it's really kind of unclear. And, when I look like just, Joe was showing between his number 1, the high zone in 1 and 10, some of them actually, the lines cut properties in half or dissect pieces off. So if I were a concerned citizen, I can't really tell from the zoning map, wait, what street does that end on and where does it start? The details aren't very clear, and I think that's really what you want to portray to anyone who's in the triangle, that maybe those zone lines need to line up to actual streets on the map. So I can say, oh, no, wait, I'm in 4, but I'm not on that street, I'm over here, It's very difficult to line it up to the actual map of Shelter Island to know.
And we do have a problem with changing it because it was used basically to put people.
Testing.
Yeah, it was used for the testing process.
I know. I just wonder if there's a way to sort of shimmy it so that as a concerned citizen, if I lived in one of these areas, I'd know for sure, oh yeah, I am in that zone or I'm in that one. It's
Well, we can clean
when you
up-
take
we
another
can-
look at it. I mean, I realize that's how you broke it up, but I think you might be able to refine it. I'm just making the suggestion. that
I think you're right that graphically
Boundaries,
these two maps could come together a little bit and be clearer, and the lines could maybe be drawn thinner. And I'm not sure people need the watershed lines.
Yeah, we could clean up these are just PDF, edits on top of base images. So we could clean those up, but
I would also volunteer to help with graphics work.
Sure. Yeah, for the average person, I think we don't want them to draw a distinction that say, I'm across the street.
So I'm okay.
And I'm on the border and the adjacent zone is 4 and mine is okay. So, it's not that specific, and the lines are a bit gerrymandered because they are where the pins ultimately were for the test. So
Okay, that makes sense.
It's not like a formal district where,
Right.
You don't have distinct boundaries.
no, there really are. If anything, there's less boundaries and more transitions, yeah, than before. And the watershed, I
Okay.
think, is where it started because presumably folks in the same watershed share some of the same hydrodynamics,
And actually, maybe that information could be included in the communique that goes out,
Would have to.
so that people don't assume that and say, oh, well, where am I?
Right.
Just something alluding to that.
Yeah.
That these are
Arbitrary lines.
arbitrary
Just
lines.
to do anonymize the data testing. Meg had her hand up.
I did. So the way I see this is it does 2 things for us. It lets us know where we have higher concentrations of nitrogen in these different regions. It also lets us know what our average is overall, which I think at the town board level, that overall average is very important because it lets us know that we're at an actionable level. So now we have to put in place policy to help address it. It gives us that benchmark, like, okay, you've gone too far, now you have to fix it. So at like the board level, it gives us that information. on the area by area level, it lets people know, hey, I should be aware, I need to test my water. So it gives us a jumping off point for education. And what I think we also need to do in the letter is come up with some place where we can say, hey, here are some references, go and read these, or talk to your professional, your water professional. Like, we need to give people references on places they can go, people they can talk to that aren't necessarily the town, but help create an information database for people.
Just clarify basically what we should have in the letter, in essence.
And also, I like the way in which you tied us into what Stella's required to do. We're now at 51%.
Right.
And so.
And that leads me to think that the information that the Heights, that the West Neck Water District and Deering Harbor, we all have to put out water reports. So it would be good for the town to have the numbers of the nitrate, they're done by wells. So it would be kind of good information to look at those as well. And then you can even draw maps of the Heights or of West Neck Water District. It's not specific like this and, but it might be help with the total overlook of nitrates in different areas.
I think what the whole ability to trend the change that's happening over time is something that, not in the letter probably, but in something on the WAC website, a website that says, here's the information. Why are we telling you got a 6, you're 4 milligrams away? Well, that's because in the last 5 years, whatever it may be, there's an increase going on around us and on the island. That presumably would be the municipal values. You said that you went back 1.5 years. I think we should consider, and I'd be more than happy to play around with it. We should do it. We should have all those numbers, and so that we can just explain to people. We'll have, at least we'll know what the trending has been. Would restaurants? I think restaurants have to test some periodic, like a 6 month or a year or whatever. We could conceivably go to some different restaurants and say, listen, we'll keep your name out of it. We're just going to say a restaurant and try and have a good firm background of this is not information from Suffolk County, which is showing the trend, which is nice. We should probably have that in this backup thing. But having that information to say, here is the trend that's happening here. And that's why you're at 6, you're in the action level, and I don't feel confident because this is going on.
And water reports, water quality
But hold on a
reports.
second. Al raised his hand. First of all, Al, welcome. It's your first time at a Water Advisory Committee meeting as a board member for this new term. Yes.
Why are we focusing on the center triangle when we know that there's elevated levels of nitrate throughout the island, even upwards of 10? Isn't this an island-wide thing? We're focusing on the triangle, so everybody outside of the triangle is okay? No,
I'm not saying that,
no. But why, we're only sending a letter to the center triangle?
because this is where we conducted a test, because it was identified that the issue was concentrated in this part of the island.
Shouldn't it go to the island residents? Here,
There's something to unpack there. There's an argument for sure. And there's you and I have sat in on, it's one island, one water. However, the center nitrogen triangle was defined specifically because it was a zone in which nitrogen levels are elevated above the rest of the island.
But there are.
It is a higher level of
other
nitrogen.
areas of the island, well away from the center triangle, that are at 10.
So are you saying, Albert, that as far as an educational tool, this would be good for all island
Whole
residents?
island. Why are we limiting it to the?
And why not send the letter to
Yeah.
everyone?
Good
Whole
question.
island. Get your water tested. These are the parameters. This is where you are. If you're over 5, this is where you are. You're at 10, everybody, just a general letter that goes out.
There's no reason to necessarily, avoid sending the letter to everyone. There's no, so that we
Well,
can.
the simple solution is to put it in the reporter. Put the letter that Albert's talking about, just an educational piece in the reporter about water quality on the island, what you need to be aware of and what your resources are. That would go island-wide. In the reporter, you could put it on the website. I don't know that everybody needs a copy in the mail, but, you know, if we
That would
did
get the
postcards
people.
or something, like
That would-
postcards instead of.
People don't
maybe
read, a lot of
full
people don't read the reporter mag. If you got a letter from the town of Shelter Island,
mail.
you would open it.
I mean, like a bulk mailing.
Yeah,
Yeah, you would open it.
We have voted that the letter should be drafted. And the board would certainly be welcome to take that letter and to send it to more, not less, of all the residences.
Good point.
We're at 3:25. Joe has stayed beyond his
Yeah, I gotta go.
hard out. And we haven't gone.
Before he leaves.
Yeah, okay, question for Joe before he leaves.
Municipal
Joe?
knowledge. I'll come and pull them out of a file cabinet.
Yes, I have a question, but Joe,
Has anyone contacted the Suffolk County Department of Health about this?
about this study?
No. I mean,
Is that planned?
well, I shouldn't say no, because some of these tests, like for the town buildings, were part of required testing. And so those get reported to the Suffolk County Health Department because they're our regional regulator. So some of them, yes, but for the private wells, no.
Okay.
All you can tell them is you're in zone 7.
Well, so I leave it to the town to decide whether Suffolk County Health Department should get a heads up
Notified.
before this letter
I
goes
can
out.
let you know that Suffolk County Department of Health is very aware of our current water quality. Every time someone puts a well in, does a well report, it gets reported to Suffolk County Department of Health. They have better information on our aquifer than we do. So they're aware of our general state of being.
Their purview
Okay.
is municipal water, though. It's not private well.
No, they get all the private well reports as well.
Right, but I mean, that's not their purview for
That's
oversight.
different though.
Right.
And every time you ask Suffolk County to test your wells, the Suffolk County gets that test because they do the test.
Are you asking if
so
they
I-
want input into the letter or?
We should.
All right, I'm assuming,
Yeah.
I mean, the town of Shelter Island has gone to a lot of work to do this. Okay, there's been a lot of talk about it. There's been a rigorous testing program. It's gone on for 4 or 5 months. We went through exercises to protect the privacy of the data and so forth. I'm assuming that somebody at the Suffolk County Department of Health needs to know that. Just so when this letter doesn't go out, there isn't a reaction from the Suffolk County Department of Health that we're not expecting and that could somehow complicate our communication efforts with our citizens and also our work around addressing the issue. So that's just, and they also might be able to help us.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a question.
I'd say, once this is maybe a little more buttoned up, conclusions, we have a number of contacts there that we can reach out
Should
to.
we, so I think,
And I'll preliminarily do that sooner, just to let them know this information is forthcoming, and I can brief them on our efforts. So it's
it
not just.
doesn't really require a vote. What you're saying is being taken.
Right. Another question before Joe leaves, sorry. We have 3 potable water suppliers on the island. Has anyone thought of asking any of those 3 water suppliers whether they could provide potable water to the people who request it? In other words, setting up some kind of a spring-loaded spigot where someone can show up with a 5-gallon bottle and fill up the bottle for drinking water.
Portable, you mean?
Potable,
Portable,
portable.
not a permanent
No,
connection
no, right.
or service.
Right. So for example, I'm on the residential repair program for the senior citizens. Okay. I can imagine, and water's heavy. Okay. I can imagine being asked as a member of the residential repair program, can you please go fill up my bottle of water? Because I need more drinking water because I'm concerned about this or whatever else. Could there be some location on the island where that could be made available? We're
The Legion.
Free public.
we're all one island.
I think then is when you're going to get Suffolk County Health Department involved.
I was going to ask Lisa, has that ever,
Ethically,
Has that ever happened with West Neck? Has there ever, sent water to?
No, we haven't. We have not. But I will tell you that Suffolk County Health Department will definitely want oversight into that kind of distribution. And
Okay, we're all on
Yeah.
one island. I think as a matter of law, the state owns the water. Okay?
yeah, they do.
The state owns the water in the ground. The state doesn't treat it, the state doesn't distribute it, but the state owns it.
Like a water fountain. That's what we're
Yeah, so
trying to offer people.
Yeah, my question is, is that a reasonable, at least inquiry?
Well, I think that, like from the perspective of West Neck Water District, the first question we would have to ask is how much water can we pump it?
Yep,
How much does it exceed our
Right.
pumpage ability to pump to our residents? I would say right now, this time of year, I got lots of water. So and since it's a municipal water district anyway, it's a matter of setting up an accounting system. Who's going to pay for the water?
right.
Is the town going to pay for the water? Certainly, you can't ask the residents to pay for it. So the logistics of that would have to be worked out. And then where does the water drawn from? Is it drawn from the well pump house?
And given,
Et cetera.
who's here, we can't leave this discussion without hearing from Lori B. Raymond. Lori, you there?
Hi, yes, I'm here. I think Lisa actually just touched on it. As a West Neck Water customer, my question would be if something was set up like that is who's going to pay for it? Because right now, West Neck Water customers pay for everything, including the electricity to pump the water, the supplies to disinfect and treat the water. And, we pay a very large rate now, including the rates for upgrading the system. And if we're now going to consider some sort of tap to provide waters to others, how is that going to be monitored and billed to those people?
And we won't decide all of that right now.
I'm just asking the question.
I'm just saying that it
represents well.
the logistics are
Because if I'm receiving this letter, if I'm receiving this letter, my question is going to be, what do I do now?
That's why, again,
Okay.
the drafting does
Right.
include
All right.
public water.
Now, we may or may not be able to get something like that in the letter, but we are all one island, okay? And the state owns the water. My last question is, where are we with the water quality tests in Sachem's Woods?
We need to approve a resolution at the town board level to authorize the test. Because to do so, we need to remove some trees to clear a path for the testing site and to access it. So we need to make sure that the town board wants to support this effort. And we have a preliminary layout of what the testing protocol would require, how many trees would be cleared, et cetera. But that's the local step that we need to take next for Sachem's Wood to.
All right, hearing that, I'd like to make a motion that this committee recommends that the town board undertake that testing. And whatever steps are necessary in terms of field work at that site, that they be undertaken so those tests can be.
I would second that motion.
I personally thought that testing was underway back in the summer and that we were expecting the results in the fourth quarter. And I personally am disappointed to hear that it hasn't even started.
Well, it's a fairly robust process. We have to take out trees, have to drill the test wells, and the town board needs to approve that, all of that activity. It will come at no cost to us for this exploratory venture, but I certainly support that. Even in case folks oppose, the removal of the trees, it's really not that intensive of a removal given the size of the parcel. And we need to know if this is a viable option, because you may find results that support further discussion on this.
Yep.
And you may very well find that this is not worth the pursuit, and we can remove this from further consideration.
So again, Andrew did make a motion. I seconded it, or Ken seconded it.
Or, whatever.
So are we all in favor?
Yeah.
I am not.
Greg is not.
Because I don't know so much about what it all means. I don't want to be, telling the town board, here's what we think.
Trees have.
That some of us I don't know enough about what it all means.
I don't have a count. It's really an access to the site.
Road.
Yeah, so there are some great changes across Satcham's Woods that make certain areas not suitable for a well, whether it be a test well or a permanent well. And so has identified where they would prefer to site a permanent well installation, and the tests should be very close to where that site, yeah. So it's really about road access more than anything.
And that would be zone 7. If we're looking at our zones, right? Satcham's Wood, so I'm just looking at the nitrates.
Good point.
I don't have a mess.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think
It's behind the IGA.
So from what I can determine, you see Midway Road, I just know where, if, this is the field right here.
right, no, it's going to be the open space of
That is
seven.
Manwaring Road. And then this is Midway Road is right here.
It's in
And
here.
I think it's outside of
I don't
it.
think it is in 7.
Between
No,
Route 114.
It's not in 7.
It's not in 7. It's
not in 7.
outside of all.
All right.
It's outside of 5.
so. There you go, me saying, no, I don't vote for this because I don't even know.
So we don't have consensus, but we do have a.
Could I ask one quick question? And I'm not sure if it's Joe or Meg. Some of these numbers here are very low. We didn't inadvertently test sites that are using RO systems, did
No.
we? So 0.01 nitrates.
The IGA.
Where?
Some places are very low.
IGA is about
It
here.
really depends on
Right.
where you're downstream from,
Because from here.
where you are
I think some of
located in
these
the
are really different.
aquifer, what
These
your
numbers and these
soil
numbers.
quality conditions are.
Depth of
There's a
well.
lot- Depth of your well. Because, you have to think of the aquifer as a three-dimensional thing,
Sure.
right? It's not just one level. So different depths of the aquifer can have different water qualities. And depending on how deep your well is, how
Old
water,
recently,
old
how
it
old
is,
the water
yeah.
is, it's all gonna impact. And also, where's your neighbor's septic system? Are you downflow, directly downflow?
That
of
part I
the
understand.
sanitary? Are you,
I was just
there's a lot to
surprised.
it.
I thought rainwater typically had 1 or 2
Well, if
milligrams.
you look at all the peninsular areas, you're gonna have much lower nitrate levels because there's a faster moving ground flow. So you're not gonna have the same retention rate that we have in the center. So the
Doesn't get
center of the
reused.
island, right, the center of the island gives you a better barometer of our actual water quality because it has a longer retention rate. So it has a
Yeah.
higher concentration, it has a steeper, so it's kind of your barometer. It's your canary in your coal mine. Because all the peninsular areas are gonna be different, and some of them have isolated aquifers from the center. So it's something to keep in mind.
Right, so again, we're not going to get through our agenda today, clearly. But the next agenda item was going to be, and we will return to, developing a program for the near shore area for saltwater intrusion for chloride testing.
I'd like to thank Joe for staying over.
Yeah, Joe, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I would, again, strongly recommend Joe's recommendation that everybody make sure, now my 4th or 5th reading through the Leggett brochures.
It's very interesting to read it again now in the context of all this stuff.
And the LINAP report was also good reference.
Yes, that I
Very
think is
good.
excellent to have.
And I might add, by the way, that any work you do in finding potable water that can be transported
Mhm.
will work very nicely for the near shore area, where we
Mhm.
have super surges and stuff like that.
Mhm.
That's the first thing that goes.
And
is
among the
local well.
recommendations within the last recommendation in Leggett brochures is that we be exploring wastewater reuse for irrigation.
Yes.
So
Big topic.
a lot of material that we,
On the last proposal.
yeah, so,
Yeah.
okay, so.
We didn't like that, did we? Darn expensive.
Well, we can do things in different, there are multiple ways to skin cats.
Yes.
I
So-
can very quickly go through the
Yeah.
fertilizer subcommittee.
Okay, we'll done.
Less than a minute.
Very expensive.
Right now, we're going to meet with Stephen Kiley, the attorney, this week to review the proposed language for
Okay, good.
codification. So once he speaks with us, then we will better know what to present before the town board with regards to putting fertilization as a separate article or topic in the code. That's it.
Good,
That's where we are.
well done.
Great. you should all have read the new irrigation laws. They went into effect January 1. And that really requires more precision on, I think it will dovetail nicely with the discussions of Leggett brochures. And so I think we have a good meeting for next time. Greg, were you a nay vote or an abstention on that one?
Again?
On the vote that we just took, were you a no or an abstention?
I was a no, I didn't feel, yeah.
Okay.
I didn't feel I knew enough about what I was recommending.
Do you feel that you would like to have some kind of outline with regards to what we need to look at before we undertake this? Or before we recommend?
Certainly
the
more than a
testing?
20-second. Yeah, you're talking about Station Wood.
Yeah, right, that's what we're talking
Well,
about.
just send it on. Let's not, that's water under the bridge now, so to speak.
No pun intended.
Yeah, so, I mean, I'm fine. It's going to the town board. They're going to be told 6-1, we recommend that you do it. So I'm fine with that. It's just that I didn't know what I was telling.
Sure. No, it makes sense.
That area was set aside, by the way, for the express purpose of water in the future.
Yeah.
When the conservation, Jan, I think, already voted on that back in zoning days.
It's certainly permitted in there in the.
It was specifically
Mention of purpose, I
related.
believe.
Paul Mobius was a part of that, Jan, yeah.
Okay, well, so very good. Then I think I would like to call for a motion to adjourn. Is there any, no comments? Hands up. Second, third. Let's all get a.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
All right.